Madam President, today, when a real window of opportunity for a political settlement of the Ukrainian crisis has opened, we must first of all talk not about declarations, but about diplomacy. Currently, trilateral negotiations between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States are underway. Contacts take place in Abu Dhabi and Geneva. The delegations work in difficult conditions, realizing the historical responsibility for the result. This is a moment that requires silence, balance, and respect for the negotiation process. Instead, we see a demonstrative disregard for the diplomatic efforts of those countries that invest political capital in the settlement, primarily the United States, and personally, the efforts of the administration of President Donald Trump aimed at finding a compromise. A particular cynicism lies in the fact that on February 17th, at the moment when the delegations of the three countries were heading to Geneva for the next round, the armed forces of Ukraine fired 151 unmanned aerial vehicles at civilian targets, mainly in the southern regions of Russia. In the week from February 9th to February 15th alone, 147 civilians were injured by shelling with 2.5 thousand ammunition. 126 people were injured, including 6 minors. 21 people died. Due to the strikes, at least 454,000 people in the Belgorod, Bryansk, Zaporozhye, and Kursk regions felt restrictions in power supply. Does this practice correspond to the declared commitment to de-escalation? Does it create the atmosphere of trust necessary to move the negotiations forward? If it is truly a desire for peace, then the steps must confirm the words, not contradict them. If the Kiev regime were really interested in achieving long-term peace, it would focus its efforts on diplomacy and on finding mutually acceptable solutions, on developing sustainable security guarantees for both Russia and Ukraine, and not on initiating another politicized vote within the framework of the 11th Emergency Special Session of the UN General Assembly, which was resumed without any grounds. The very logic of convening the emergency special session was based on the assumption that the Security Council was unable to perform its primary function of maintaining international peace and security. However, exactly a year ago, the UN Security Council spoke out on the Ukrainian issue by adopting Resolution 2774, confirming the need for a peaceful resolution of the conflict. A natural question arises. If the Council is fulfilling its role, if negotiation efforts are being made, on what basis is the current format being revived, and what is the real goal? It is obvious that those who initiated the resumption of the CSS are not interested in a political settlement of the Ukrainian crisis and not in a sustainable peace, but in using this political tool to put pressure on Russia. However, such actions are not able to affect the real outcome of the negotiations, just as they are not able to change the state of affairs at the front. We have also consistently stated that we cannot consider the resolutions previously adopted during this session as balanced and conducive to a settlement. All of them are one-sided, contain demands that are detached from reality, and reproduce Kiev's political attitudes. A year ago, an attempt was made in this hall to actually legitimize certain provisions of the so-called peace formula of Zelensky. In December, an initiative was put forward on the topic of Ukrainian children, which was replete with inaccurate data, ignoring real facts and practical activities of Russia and Ukraine on family reunification. They are trying to artificially replace peace efforts with the rubber stamping of resolutions, passing off yet another non-consensus product as an expression of the will of the international majority. Dear colleagues, today a new text is proposed, which in fact continues the same line. The draft resolution is entitled Support for Lasting Peace in Ukraine. However, its content focuses primarily on the demand for an immediate and complete ceasefire. The ceasefire itself can be an important element of a settlement, but it is not an end in itself. History knows many examples when a hasty truce without addressing the root causes of the conflict turned into only a pause before a new round of violence. Obviously, Kyiv, faced with serious difficulties at the front and a reduction in external support from Western sponsors, is primarily interested in a respite for regrouping and rearmament. Moreover, this resolution, like all the previous flawed products of the UN General Assembly on this topic, selectively quotes the UN Charter. It emphasizes the principle of sovereignty and territorial integrity, exclusively in relation to one country. And where is the mention of another fundamental principle, the right of peoples to self-determination? Where is the reference to the need to respect human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion? For 8 years after the unconstitutional coup d'etat of 2014 in Ukraine, the civilian population of Donbass was subjected to systematic pressure, restrictions on language rights, and a military operation called anti-terrorist. And today we see that even the guarantees of the rights of Russian-speaking citizens enshrined in the Constitution of Ukraine remain only on paper. The formulation of a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace sounds declaratively attractive, but these words should not hide the desire to enshrine unilateral approaches in UN decisions. Peace cannot be just if it is interpreted through the prism of the demands of one side and completely ignores the legitimate concerns of the other. It cannot be comprehensive if it excludes the issues of security and the right to freely use one's native language and religion. And even more so, it cannot be durable if the proposed formulas do not imply a balance of interests and mutual guarantees. A truly sustainable solution is possible only through an equal, respectful dialogue, without accusations and without the imposition of pre-prepared schemes. Special attention should be paid to the statement in the text about ongoing attacks against the civilian population of Ukraine. All objective and sensible delegations know that Russia does not deliberately target civilians. Every human life is important to us, unlike the practice of the Ukrainian armed formations, which systematically use drones and artillery against civilian targets. Dear colleagues, don't be fooled. This is not an instrument of peace, but of politicization. No matter how attractive the diplomatic package it may be wrapped in, its task is to form the next batch of accusations, which will then be used as an element of pressure. At the same time, the Zelensky regime and its European curators still need figures that can then be passed off as unwavering support. You have a choice. It is possible to support a document that ignores the complexity of the conflict, unilaterally interprets the norms of the UN Charter, and creates obstacles to negotiations. Or, you can give the negotiators the opportunity to complete the work they have begun. The Russian Federation will vote against this draft resolution of the General Assembly and any of its individual paragraphs if they are put to a vote, since this Ukrainian text is not subject to amendment. We call on other states to do the same. Every no vote is a vote for the search for sustainable solutions and not for another round of political rhetoric. Thank you for your attention.